Good morning, everyone. Kimberly Solfridge here with the Kids Money Project, and we are coming to you live on the morning show this morning. I hope you are having a fantastic day so far. I have Andrew Oakes here from, let me make sure I get this right, Stress Relief Headquarters. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, we have him here talking to us today. So we are going to kind of talk about stress today and really the fact that it is the number one factor, or financial matters are the number one factor for stress in the United States anyway. And frankly, I kind of figure it's probably a little wider spread than that if I had to guess. But Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so we know who you are, and maybe give us a little background on what you do and then maybe how you got into it.
Okay. So I'm a stress coach and a stress speaker, and I help people solve stress. When I originally started coaching, I coached on finances, and that was just because that was my segue from my old life to my new life. It just so happened to be with financial education. I grew up poor in a trailer park, a single wide trailer. We might have made it to, I say, lower middle class by the time I was a teenager. So my parents did evolve, but I remember living in that single wide trailer, and there was a neighborhood behind us, and they had these little 1,000 to 1,200 square foot houses, and I
Mhm.
thought, man, they're so rich.
Yeah.
And I always lived kind of poor, even though I worked really hard and I lived paycheck to paycheck. And one book changed everything for me. And once that one book changed everything for me, I just continued to change people's lives. But a
Mhm.
year before I picked up that book, I was in a life change. My wife had left me in a marriage. I
Mhm.
quit smoking, I quit drinking, I quit chewing my nails, I quit drinking caffeine, I quit watching TV, I quit every single vice I had.
Right.
Over the next year, I'd lose 76 pounds.
Nice.
And the reason why that was is I learned to remove the discomforts from my life. I
Mhm.
looked at my life and I was like, man, I was never comfortable with who I was, always pretending to be this tough guy. I was an alligator hunter. I killed a 12-foot, 545-pound alligator, put it in a 14-foot John boat with me. I had my own farm. I was raising my own my own sheep and goats and tons of other livestock. And I was butchering them and making our own meat for the family, for my unit, my friends. And I was a railroader, and I just had all these hardcore things. And I was like, why? How did I get here? I don't really like killing things. I
Right.
hate it. It bothers me every night. Every time I do it, I hate it. I hate it so much. How did I get here? And then I
Right.
started looking. All my friends were hunters. All my friends were these hard guys, and I'm like, I'm not really that hardcore of a guy. So I really questioned who I was, and that was when I realized, well, why weren't you being you?
Right.
Because you weren't comfortable with who you were or who you truly are. See, now I got tattoos of flowers. I would never have been the sensitive guy, back then, but now
Right.
I'm very okay with who I am.
Mhm.
That life change of removing the discomfort. So what is comfort? Comfort is nothing more than a lack of discomfort. So I wanted to be a comfortable person. You look at the happiest people in the world, they're comfortable. Look at the best salesman in the world, he's comfortable. You
Mhm.
look at people that can handle the most, that have the most in life, they're comfortable people.
Mhm.
They're the CEOs of the company because they can handle more stress, because they
Mhm.
have a really good way of handling the stress. Well,
Right.
as I removed the discomfort from my life, when I quit my vices, that's why. I realized, hey, if I felt anxiety and depression, which I suffered from my entire life since I was a young child, if I went and smoked a cigarette every time I felt anxiety, I was rewarding a discomfort. I said,
Mhm.
I'm no longer going to reward another discomfort in my life. In
Right.
fact, I'm just going to keep pulling them out. And then that's when I went to this financial book. And that was the first book I ever read. And I have not turned back. Started financial coaching, but then I started realizing how intertwined everything is.
Yes.
So people were coming to me to help them with their financial stress. But if you look at all the sectors in their life, it was finances is just one of the major discomforts. 78% of failed marriages are because of money fights and money problems.
Mhm.
It's a huge issue. But what I do now is I not only work in the financial sector, but in all the sectors of the life to remove the discomforts.
Yeah. Well, no, you were kind of talking about you were doing stuff and you kind of came to that realization that it was you were doing stuff that your friends were doing and things like that. And then having to ask yourself, why was I doing this? And I think that's the mentality that a lot of Americans certainly tend to fall into, is that kind of keeping up with the Joneses and doing things not necessarily because we want to, because we're almost putting on this mask or this face for the outside world, and a lot of times we can't keep up with it because we're trying to keep up with somebody else. And of course, we don't know about their situation. I mean, they may be fine. They may be doing exactly what they can do, or they may be doing the exact same thing. And they're getting further in debt with this, which then, of course, is just going to lead to more financial stress, which leads to more stress in your life as it is. And which then eventually leads to health problems and other other things from that. And so it's this horrible cycle that you can get yourself into. And and congratulations for recognizing it, because I think sometimes that's the hardest part of the whole journey, is actually recognizing that there is something going on that may not be working for you. But not only did you recognize it, you stepped out and said, okay, what do I do about this? And you went and found out what to do. I mean, I'm sure when you first made that realization, you're like, okay, I have no idea what to do about this now, but you figured it out. And that's the second part of the equation. So congratulations. And look like you're doing fantastic with it.
It's been
And
great.
well, and then taking it to the next step of helping other people, because this is a an issue that we have, I definitely nationwide, and it, as I'm finding out, definitely a worldwide issue. It's
Oh, yeah.
something that's across all spectrums and cultures. It is what it is. And so it's time to do something about that. So, well, thank you. So you started stress relief headquarters, and I am assuming that is kind of where you're finding all of this to kind of come out of, where you're looking for people that essentially were a lot like the situation you found yourself in, and helping these people from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then a lot of it was social media. None of this was my chosen life.
Right.
I never read a book until I was 27 years old. I had an issue. I had an issue. I have a hair on me. I had an issue by one of my wife's hairs. So I never read because in school I was ADHD, and the teachers as a discipline would make me read out loud, and they would also have like the daily reading where sometimes the kids would all have to read out loud. Well, I didn't read out loud because if I did, I struggled, and I struggled severely, and other kids would make fun of me. And when they made fun of me, I didn't like it very much, so I got into fights.
Again,
So
a cycle.
and I just avoided reading my entire life. I hated the education system because I was very different.
Mhm.
At third grade, they put me on Ritalin, the highest dose that they can legally put me on, and it was an adult dosage for a child. I've
Mhm.
always been this high energy guy, and they always write on this on the report card every single time, every year. Not a bad kid, talkative and hyper,
Right.
talkative and hyper. So I wasn't really good for the system. So I hated that, and I hated the fact that we had to learn things like the average rainfall of Brazil, and they're like, it doesn't apply to me, or like algebra, like why this doesn't make any sense. Why are we going so deep into calculus? Yeah, I'm okay at it. I'm good at it, but
Mhm.
why do I have to know all these things? Or I struggled severely with reading. That was the main one. And
Mhm.
at 27, I finally read that book. I forced myself. It took me 3.5 months, and I had to reread it so many times. I don't know anybody that would not have gave up.
Right.
It was that frustrating to me. I never read my bills. No wonder I was $108,000 in debt. Okay,
Right.
when I finally looked at my debt, because it said it in that book to look at your debt, sit down and write it all out, I almost threw up. I was
Mhm.
like, whoa, I've never looked at debt like this. I've
Right.
only looked at it as, hey, can I make the payment? Can I
Mhm.
make the $320 payment? That's it.
Yes.
I had it. It was an awful way to live because I was paycheck to paycheck. But that the reason why that discomfort spawned me taking action on two discomforts, by the way. Reading the book was a major discomfort, and
Mhm.
then the financial sector was a major discomfort in my life. I had $350 of savings. That was the minimum you could have in there. I had a $420 truck payment. I said, hey
Oh,
man, you got to work on this.
right.
If you miss one single payment
Right.
or one single paycheck, you're in trouble.
Right. Well, and then look what we had. I mean, this was how long ago now that you found yourself at 108,000 in debt? How long ago was
That
that?
was in 2016, I think.
Okay, so 16, and then look what hit us, kind of right there at the beginning of 2020. Can you imagine having to have gone through, what we've gone through in this last year with that situation? I mean, there's just no, I mean, and there are people in that situation. That's the unfortunate thing. And
Hmm.
you could have been, if you hadn't had this revelation when you did, you would have been in that same exact situation, and maybe worse, because we know how it builds. It's there's compounding interest, and it works with us for both directions. It can work for you if you're investing and things like that. It can work in your favor, but when you're in debt, especially with a lot of credit cards and stuff, that compounding interest will work on that negative side for
Oh,
you,
it's
where it
eating you.
just
It's destroying you.
it
And
absolutely does.
Dave Ramsey talks about it like a hole, like you're trying to build an empire on a lot, but it's a massive hole, and,
Mhm,
your debt is that massive hole. But here's the thing: your income is a shovel.
mhm.
You can increase the size of your shovel by maybe taking a second job, working some overtime.
Right.
But as you're throwing the dirt into the hole to try to fill it back in, this debt, what's happening is at the bottom of it is a river.
Mhm,
The higher the interest rate, the bigger that river is. So the more dirt you throw in, the more dirt it takes out.
mhm.
And it's
Absolutely.
unfortunate. You can't build on that.
No, absolutely not. It is just gonna wash right out from underneath you, and it's just, again, a continuous cycle for it. Well, I know people are probably dying to know what book it is that you actually read that got you out of this.
The Total Money Makeover, and it was actually 2015.
Mhm.
And then I had my neck surgery October of 2016.
Okay.
So I actually broke my neck and had a financial setback in the middle of all that.
Oh, wow. Well, see, at least you were already on the right path. You were getting the knowledge that you didn't already have. And of course, that's one of the reasons I'm kind of doing what I'm doing, is I know this knowledge is not out there. It's not something that we learn in schools growing up, and it's unfortunately not something that parents talk about, and it's for a number of different reasons. Because one, I think a lot of parents don't know it themselves. And then
Yeah.
two, it can be a very uncomfortable conversation, particularly if you may be finding yourself in some financial issues. You feel like, well, I don't want to worry my kids. I don't want to, talk to them. And there are ways of doing that without putting your kids through, worry and stuff like that. But it's just a conversation that's kind of taboo in our culture. We just don't talk about it. And the problem is, it's an essential life lesson that we all have to have. I love that quote that talks about, money's not everything, but it is about as close to oxygen on the I gotta have it scale as you can get. It is in our culture. We use money, but we use money to buy transportation, shelter, food, clothing. I mean, these are all things that we have to have, and we buy them using money. So therefore, we have got to use money in our daily lives. But in order to do that, we need to know how to manage it as well. So, yeah.
And they don't teach us in the education system. And then
No.
not only do they not teach us in the education system, they start to teach us all these self-limiting beliefs. It comes from our family, it comes from the education system, it comes from all around. They say, hey, money is the root of all evil.
Right.
The love of money is the root of all evil. So
Mhm.
finish the quote out. It's not talking about the money itself. It's
Right.
talking about your behavior with the money. And
Mhm.
we have this idea. I'm going to go to my 3-year-old's board here. We have this idea that if rich people are evil, what's the likelihood you'll ever become rich?
Right.
It's a self-limiting belief. It's this disturbing setup, because now, say if you do deem yourself as a good person, to me, in my philosophy, I personally believe you are morally obligated to acquire as much money as possible. And this is why. So say this is all the world's money. This screen here. This is the entire pile of money here. We have the bad control over here, which is in the dark side, and then you have the good control. See, if you find yourself to be a good person, the more money that good people have,
Mhm.
the less money that evil people have over here.
Absolutely.
So the more we acquire, the more good we can do with. See, churches are built with money. People are fed with money.
Mhm.
Time is bought with money. So we can't look at money as being this evil thing, because this is the thing that's going to lead you to your freedom. and then you utilize that in a good way. The
Mhm.
money's only bad if you use it in a bad way. So if you think, hey, if I get rich, I'm going to start doing cocaine and buying strippers.
Maybe don't go get rich then, if that's what you're
Yeah,
gonna do.
you're heading for a bad road. You should probably try like some Buddhist type where you try to remove stuff from your life
Right.
instead of add to it, right? So, but if you have these great visions, these good things, these good intentions, you deserve it, and you are morally obligated to go get
Mhm. Well, I love the fact that you said, I mean, if you think you are good, and most people are, but if you have the money, you can do more good things with that money. And like you said, it takes it away from that other side where, I mean, money, unfortunately, it's a tool. And
it. Yeah,
so good and bad things can be done with it. I mean, that's a fact. It's not the money doing it, it's somebody behind the money that's controlling what happens with it. And if you have, like you said, more good people controlling the money, more good things are going to happen just naturally from it. So I love that philosophy. I've never actually heard it put that way, but completely agree with it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, so your journey started, I guess, really with your finances and stuff, and kind of realizing that you were in a hole at this point, and that's why you read, Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, which, I've read it as well. It's a great book.
yeah,
I think we're actually both master coaches through his
yeah.
program and everything. So, um, so yeah, it definitely has some great information there and got you on a track. How long did it actually take you to, from that time you started it, I guess, did you finish the book completely before you got started? Did you figure out as you were going through the book,
It
or?
took me 3.5 months to read the book.
Okay.
And here's how obsessed I am. When I'm committed to something, that's the beauty about ADHD. I always believed it was a disorder, like they call it, attention deficit hyper disorder.
Mhm,
What it actually is a difference in cognitive function.
mhm,
So if you have ADHD out there, I want you to know something, or your son has ADD or ADHD right now. I want you to know something cool. Over half of America's self-made millionaires, because I don't care about the ones that made it or inherited it or got it like in the lottery. So self-made millionaires, over half of them have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, or OCD, which are
mhm.
all linked to the same chromosomal defect.
Right,
Is it a defect?
right.
CEOs, like I started figuring out, like when I seen that statistic about millionaires, because if you want to be rich, do what rich people do. So study what rich people do.
Right.
And that's what I was up to. And that's when I seen that little snippet about ADHD. I said, oh, they've been telling me it's a curse my whole life. All
Right.
of a sudden, it's no longer a curse. I'm saying, well, what else about ADHD? That's when I finally learned that, hey, it isn't a disorder. It's just
Mhm.
a difference in the cognitive function. I watched a couple YouTube videos. And then I found out that they believe over half of America's high rise executives, like CEO level type executives, have ADHD, OCD, or ADD, all linked to the same chromosome defect. It
Mhm.
turns out it isn't my weakness. It's
Right.
actually one of the greatest things that I have. Yes, I couldn't focus on some of the, like, I've never watched, this is weird about me. It's a fun fact. I've never watched a sci-fi movie
Mhm.
or the modern Marvel comics or any
Okay.
of that. Star Wars, never seen Star Wars, never seen Star Trek because it doesn't interest me.
Mhm.
But the things that do interest me, I learn it with an obsession. So I took this book and I couldn't read. It took me 5 to 10 hours a day for 3.5 months. That's how committed I was to reading that book.
Mhm.
I just kept reading it and reading it. I implemented it about 7 months after reading it
Mhm.
because it just couldn't set in yet. It
Right.
was so against the poor mind that I had. And it took a while. And then I said, and my wife didn't like it when I was telling her about it. So I'm sharing that information with her. I saved my marriage, by the way. And this is a year after that, the initial uh, change in my life.
Mhm.
So I finally get on track and I start telling her, like, hey, I'm going to start doing this. She looks at me like I'm crazy until a couple months later, and then she's on board finally with me. So
Right.
if your spouse is not in, just keep going, just start going and start walking in that way, and eventually things will iron out.
Mhm.
um, I had $108,000 in debt. When I sat down and wrote it down, that's about when I threw up and felt like I was like, oh, this is awful. I mapped it out. I wanted to see the plan. I figured it would take me about 7.5 years.
Mhm.
We did it in 2 years.
Wow.
Once you
Wait.
start doing it, the money finds you. I had a check come in from a house that I had. The insurance company said, "Hey, we did this audit from like 5 years ago, and we found out that we overcharged you." They sent me
Right.
a check for $700. That never happens.
Right.
But we were doing good with money, so money started finding us.
Right. And it's amazing those little things that happen like that. Because again, that's just not something that you would expect. It came out of complete blue for you. But things do seem to happen when you're on that right track. You've got it down, you've got that plan, you're following the plan, you're making the decisions. And it is funny how those little things start to happen like that. And so yeah, that's fantastic. And particularly since you did it so quick. I mean, 2 years, that's fantastic to kinda pull yourself out of that kinda debt, and that just tells you it was a mindset issue. You had to change your mindset
Yes.
first, and,
Working at the same job. Same
right,
job.
exactly. And, well, and I love the fact that, essentially your entire life, you had kind of been told this ADHD was a negative thing and it was holding you back. And all of a sudden you learn, no, it's not. That's an excuse that people were using. And, and because of that, you were using it because and you were told to. You were told this is how it works.
This
And
is
then
your
you
disorder.
discovered, right? Well, then you discover it's not, and it's actually, like you said, it's a benefit to you. You can use that to your advantage, and you obviously did. You jumped right in there and took it. So, no, that's fantastic. So, but but yeah, so financial journey can be a very tricky one because it's all about choices, and a lot of it for me comes down to your mindset because if you're kind of cluttered in what you're thinking and stuff, because we have to be very careful at what we tell ourselves. If we're telling ourselves negative things, oh well, I don't understand enough about finances, so I'll never get it. And so you're right, you never will. Kind of like the Henry Ford quote that he always said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. It's what you believe that you can actually do, and you changed your mindset to believe that you could, and you did. I mean, your story is fantastic, and I think it's one people need to hear because I think a lot of people almost they hear them, but I think they don't really believe they exist somehow, and but they absolutely do. So,
If
and then oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say a link to people sometimes is like, well, Andrew, you don't understand. I'm not like you. And I say I don't care about money or something like that. That's especially early on. I don't even talk to people readily about money nowadays unless they bring up the subject and now help a little bit because people are so cantankerous around money. It
Yeah.
is crazy how offended they get about two things. There's two things that people have issues with. Talk about their vices, the way
Mhm.
they smoke or drink or something like that. They get upset with that. And number two is talk about finances. They
Mhm.
get upset. But I was the same exact person.
Right.
At 22 years old, my brother comes home from the military. Hadn't seen him in quite a while. My brother had started learning about day trading, and he was making a good, substantial amount of money
Mhm.
doing it. And my brother really wanted to include me in this. He says,
Mhm.
Andrew, you just put a couple $100 in here, and then you can make some money, and I'll show you how to do this, and you can move money. And then me and my dad were sitting there, and I finally, and me and my dad are drinking, and sitting there, and I look at my brother, and I said, "You don't get it. We're not like you. We don't give a bleep about money.
Right.
I did it too.
Mhm.
I just wasn't ready.
Right.
That's all."
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. It's a shift, and it can be a big shift, particularly if you've been taken down one road your entire life, and depending on where you are in that life, I mean, that may be a lot to turn over. And
Oh,
again, it you didn't get there overnight, so you're not going to change it overnight. But if you take you take that small step forward, then you take another small step forward, and you keep doing that, you'll eventually get there. And each person, and of course it gets easier the longer you do it and the more you're gaining from it, the faster it will start to go. It has an exponential effect to it. And so like you said, when you sat down originally and kind of planned this out, you figure, okay, about 7 years and I can do this. And look what happened, you did it in two. And so it has an effect that, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you'll actually put forward to it. So no, that's great. Well, I greatly, greatly appreciate you coming and sharing your story with us. And I know you have so much more. We had a conversation not long ago that I know I was just scribbling notes left and right, and I loved that you were talking about wealth philosophies. And we just unfortunately don't have the time to talk about that all today. But I would love to have you back so we can talk about some of that and talk about what you do a little bit more because I think it's so important. And obviously, I'm a big advocate for learning finances because again, I know people did not learn this in school. I mean, I went through school and I did learn it and realized I didn't learn it in school. I learned it from my mom. And so that's the whole reason I obviously started the Kids Money Project is I want to encourage parents to do this same thing. I can't imagine where I would be. And some people may not have the resolve. They may not be able to see, you finally hit a point where you saw it. And obviously you're still relatively young when you saw it, but what if you don't see it until your 50s or your 60s? That's not that you can't overcome it then. You absolutely can. But the earlier you see it, and so if we can teach our kids these lessons before they're out of the house, before they get in that real world, you can save them all of these issues and stuff. And so that's kind of the whole point of it, right? Try to be the best parents we can be.
And then so if the listener right now, if you, I'll come on next Friday and we'll add some more value. If you're stressed out, if you're anxious, if you're worried, if you're depressed, find your breath. You know that mask that you put on your face, you feel your breath coming from around it, or put your hand in front of your mouth and feel your breath, or choose to feel your heart. Either one. If you can find your heartbeat or you can find your breath, you have made it through 100% of the adversities, 100% of the hardships you've ever faced in your life. Not only have you made it through all that, you've made it through 100% of the things you've ever worried about. You're a winner. Just
Absolutely.
keep going. Keep moving forward. It doesn't matter where this finds you. This message finds you at 17 years old or 55 years old.
Mhm.
You are only a few years away from a total transformation of your life. And it seems like, okay, well, 2 or 3 years from now, doesn't seem like that you can make that much progress. We paid off our house. We paid off our debt, and then we paid off our house. I was able just in a couple years to buy a brand new truck with cash. I failed seventh grade with a 40 in English. I was told that I had a disorder my entire life. I could have barely read. I could still barely read books.
Mhm.
I'm not a high IQ student. I didn't do good in school. I barely made it through high school. I cheated on all the tests, watched all the books. If I could do it, you could do it too.
Mhm.
The one thing I will tell these people is get the information.
Yes.
Do not allow the information to escape you, because as long as the information is escaping you, you don't have a reason to do better.
Right.
And one of the greatest depressions we can have in our life is knowing we can do better
Mhm.
and not doing better.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to leave it with that because that couldn't have been a better send off if I've ever heard one. So yeah, everybody, I hope you listened. I hope you heard what he was saying and take it to heart. Kind of do that deep dive and look at yourself and come back, join us next Friday and we'll keep that conversation moving forward. So thank you so much, Andrew, for coming today. And you can reach out onto our website and find his contact information. And we'll also put it here at the bottom of in the comment section of this video. That way it's a little closer. That way if you see it and you want to jump right out there, you can. But it's also on our website, thekidsmoneyproject.com. And but we look forward to seeing everybody again next week, and we'll see you next Friday. Thank you.